everyone. I know there's still people trickling in, which is great, but let's go ahead and get after it because this is a topic that I'm really excited to talk about. Everyone, you're in for a treat. We have two heavy hitters today, both longtime technology veterans and both pioneers in the AI space. I think Kevin was working on his first neural networks back in the 90s at Stanford, actually, and then did the MBA thing. But I think, Dan, did you and Kevin actually go to Stanford at the same time? Did we figure that out?
I think we might have overlapped.
I was
Did we
there
talk about this on the
94 to
podcast,
95.
Kevin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So both veterans, but both also trusted by all the vanguard of AI enterprise folks right now into introducing AI into the enterprise. Kevin, if you don't know him, is founder and CEO of ProLego. It's a company founded 7 years ago to help large enterprises navigate the complex topics like the ones we're going to discuss today, like huge clients like Raytheon, Citibank, Bristol Myers, Squibb, Bosch. He's also the real deal, like an AI fanatic, like a lot of us, who is just as comfortable in the boardroom presenting and leading leading enterprise leaders through their journey as like staying up till 2 a.m. coding, keeping up his technical chops. So definitely a double threat and knows what he's talking about. He's also a creative and entertaining, just passionate person. So go to prolego.com, check out he's got graphic novels, tons of amazing YouTube videos. Definitely a person to follow.
Well, thanks,
And
Ben. Now you've
if
set
that
the
were not,
bar up here. So
yeah, definitely. You will meet it. I have no doubt.
okay, thanks.
And it is, if Kevin were not enough, we have Dan Turchin. So my friend for a number of years, and as of a month ago, my boss, which is really exciting when you get to work with someone you love and respect for a long time. Dan's the CEO and founder of PeopleRain. It's a leading AI platform for IT and HR employee service automation. He's the member of Forbes Technology Council, has posted over 250 episodes of AI and the Future of Work podcast. I think Kevin and I have both been on, actually. Before PeopleRain, Dan did 8 million things. I'll list a couple. CEO of several companies, along with the head of product at ExcelOps, Big Panda, senior director of product strategy at ServiceNow. He's a board member, angel investor, startup advisor to over 30 AI first companies. Again, both the real deal, heavy hitters. I know I'm embarrassing them, so I will shush now. And gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for taking your time. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks for
guys. Looking
moderating,
forward
Ben.
to it as well.
And not these gentlemen are both men of action. So without any further ado, I kind of want to get into it and really start this conversation out right. But before we get into the awesome futuristic topics, if we can just take a moment and talk about how did we get here? Like, let's talk about like over the past decade, what strategic shifts have CIOs made to enhance operational efficiency in their organization?
You want to go
Kevin,
first,
I
Dan,
can
or should I
jump
take
in.
it first? Go ahead.
So if you rewind the clock 25 years or so, the role of the CIO used to be basically to be a technology traffic cop, telling the business what they could and couldn't do. Ben knows this better than anyone. Ben didn't introduce himself, but Ben's a published author, multi-time technology leader, and certainly shares a lot of the scars and a lot of the vision that I have and that Kevin has that we'll talk about. But over the past couple decades, what's happened is progressive CIOs have shifted to a focus on the business and a focus on running IT and technology like a business. We introduced the term a couple decades ago, IT service management, basically as a way of thinking about IT as how it can add value for the business and thinking about it as a human first practice. Even before we had the tools that we have today, that vision of shifting from just enforcing policies around what technology can be used to enabling the business to do great things with technology. We then shifted from a focus on IT service management to ESM, or enterprise service management. And that was basically taking the philosophy and that approach to IT service management and IT leaders extending that kind of discipline and process out to other functional areas in the business. And now with the advent, we're just on the cusp of being able to automate more processes in much more interesting ways using AI and machine learning. The role of the CIO becomes more of kind of a visionary and a business leader. And that's what I've seen happen over the last couple of decades is we've kind of continually evolved the role and the amount of responsibility that the CIO has to shape the future of the business, as opposed to just implementing and managing technology.
Yep, totally agree. And I think that sort of visionary role is coming into more and more focus and is going to be it's just going to be table stakes for the job. I think when I look at I'm going to, the comments I make about operational efficiency are really going to apply to AI because that's what I do. I mean, recognizing that's kind of a big topic in IT generally. So just for context there, for anybody who wants to interpret what I'm saying, I think what I've realized about a lot of AI, if you look at the past decade, is that it really has not lived up to the hype. And think back to 2012 to 2015, there was an enormous amount of excitement in what was happening with computer vision and machine translation with neural networks, primarily with Google Translate. And it was just like AI was going to be the next great thing. And what we found in the 2015 to 20, I guess till February of 2023 is that the successes of applying AI broadly have been pretty limited. I mean, they have definitely been there, but to leverage this narrow AI was expensive. It required a lot of expertise, a lot of data, and like intense organizational focus for a very long period of time. And that's tough for organizations to sustain. And so we didn't really see big efficiency improvements except from the biggest of the big, the Baidus and Googles and Amazons that had the scale, the data, the talent to be able to do it. And so I think there's a lot of, in terms of what has worked and what has not, there was a lot of mixed success and a lot of CIOs and people that got burned by kind of over investing and realizing they didn't have they didn't really have the data. Or they didn't have the data, or they didn't really have the business buy-in or the team to be able to execute on what they wanted to do. That's all that all changed in March of 2023 with the arrival of GPT-4. And the difference, I think there's a clear segment within CIOs now of those who recognize what's happened and how big the shift is and are just taking steps towards getting it, versus a lot that are still kind of fighting the last war, that are still saying, well, we've got to get our data fixed, or they're waiting for the business to come to them with an opportunity. And so in terms of the visionary CEO, that is definitely that's the biggest difference I see. And I think we could spend some time in this discussion today digging into details like why it's so different now.
Yeah, I love that. I do want to dig into that. I actually, there's I'll plug the podcast AI in the Future of Work, Dan's podcast. I listened to a podcast with Kevin, where you the guest, and this was back in the ChatGPT 3 days, where it was a much different world. Like, it's amazing, but it really was a lot different. You were talking about this concept of moment of abundance, right? There's this time to slow this, I think you were using the example of like, electric cars and Tesla, and it starts off, there's this incremental development, and then all of a sudden, cowabunga. Like it's a game changer, right? Are we at that moment of abundance? And then can you like kind of explain real quickly what that is? And I'm just curious personally, like, are we there yet, or are we just at the beginning?
In terms of the what generative AI is going to do, we are at the very, very beginning. And I think the biggest thing that's happened between the time I had that last conversation and now is that the if you'd asked me a year ago, in fact, I was publicly saying a year ago, as was a lot of people, including the OpenAI team working on GPT 3.5, that we were looking at incremental improvements because there was no good reason to believe why throwing just more data, more computing power, and bigger neural networks would give us a big improvement. And it turns out we were all wrong. And so we got 10 years ahead in the last, with GPT-4 and the arrival of these large language models. And it's caused all of us to reset our thinking. So instead of thinking about abundance in AI, what we've now realized is that we're at a completely new way of building software. That the way we've built software for the past 50 years of writing business rules and explicitly telling computers what to do with programming, that's all going to be replaced with intelligent software functions where we're telling a powerful brain, go get me all the data I need, organize it, and come back with the information that I need to do my work. So we're still going to need programmers. We're still going to need people doing work. We're just going to be doing it much differently with a more powerful technology. So we're at the very, very beginning of the biggest change in software that we've had in the last 50 years.
There's
I
a
think
lot of
that's
discussion in Silicon Valley about the platform shifts from the last couple decades and whether or not the shift to AI first, or as Kevin alluded to, non-deterministic software is another platform shift, or is it something more foundational? And I believe that unlike, let's say, the shift to cloud or from desktop to mobile or from clients or mainframe to client server, the shift to AI first applications is different.
Yeah.
And the reason I feel like is because it's the first time that it's like holding up a mirror to humanity. And our relationship with machines fundamentally changed when all of a sudden they were human-like and we could chat with them and they would chat back. And they now say things that almost make them seem sentient, which asterisk, they're not. They're actually quite dumb still. But regardless, this shift toward AI first applications kind of transcends technology. And I think that all of the previous shifts that we've gone through are more technology led. And this is more a fundamental shift in how we think about what it means to be a human. And I think what we're going to see as we get deeper into this conversation is the ramifications of that on how we approach the extent to which we allow AI into our lives is far beyond just a conversation about technology.
Yeah, completely agree, Dan. But we could go deep on this topic. And I think even just here you frame it like a platform versus fundamental shift. I think one of the challenges is like a lot of people who are evaluating AI are trying to treat it like a platform purchase, right? Okay, we did the cloud migration, we know what that is. But though a lot of times the platforms are a replacement of something you understand today for something new. So if you're bringing a new database, or we have a database today, this is a different database. But the people that own it, how you work, how you integrate, it's just a different way of doing the same type of job differently. But you're right. Now we're changing the relationship we have with computers. And I mean, I'm at the sort of application development on the coding side of this. And I think that when we really wanted to go deep into generative AI, I wanted to start spinning up quick demos based on like known projects our clients had. And so I pulled my team together and say, all right, we're going to do a 2-week sprint. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to have daily stand-ups. We're going to like work through how to get this generative AI stuff done. And I had that conversation on a Monday at noon, and they emailed me 4 hours later, said, we're done. I was like, what do you mean we're done? Like we just got started. And what I realized was like they were just able to quickly leverage the reasoning power of the models to do everything for them. And it's not a magic bullet, but it does change how you think about working with technology because it's no longer about doing the stuff yourself, but like, all right, how do I organize the problem and what I'm going to spend my time on so I can get it to do what I want it to do the fastest instead of figuring out how am I going to explicitly get the data, organize the data, solve the problem. You don't, it's just a whole different way of thinking about work. And I think that's also one of the reasons why it can be hard for companies to get started because it is so abstract. But I think we'll get into some suggestions for that as part of this discussion.
And that's a really good segue into where my head is at. And a lot of CIOs and leaders, what are they doing right now if they work on the calendar year? Uh, Yearly planning. So
Mhm.
we're talking about, by the way, it's not just technology, it's not a platform purchase and my budget. The world is changing. I'm changing. I'm not, my org still feels 10 years old. Yeah, I'm having to change myself as a human in my personal life, plus the culture. That's a lot of change. And then they're going to walk into a meeting later today where they have to go over their budget for 2024. Like, what's step one for, like, okay, this is, maybe a light bulb just went off like it did in my head of like, oh yeah, you're not buying an AI platform. Like, it's different. The word is different,
Yeah.
not more or other. It's different. Any advice? Where do we just even start when we walk into that meeting with the CFO and start talking about, like, okay, here's our strategy. What do we talk about at the next all hands?
I spend most of my day doing this, so I could take this one down unless you want to jump in.
Please
So
lead out.
yeah. So I imagine I get this conversation all the time. It's like, hey, we're working on our AI strategy. And so I've done more AI strategies for big companies than I could possibly remember. And what I've realized after a while was that usually it starts off with, hey, Kevin, we want an AI strategy. We're gonna, gather up the use cases and interview everybody and talk about what we're going to do and plan it out. And we're going to like have our, our roadmap for multi-years and our budget. We're going to organize all this stuff over 6 months, send it to the board, get a bunch of money to go do AI. And after a half a dozen times doing this, I realized that everybody was basically coming up with the same freaking strategy. And so typically what would happen was we'd go with a client and we'd go into the conference room and we start mapping out what they could do with AI. And so regardless of the state of the technology, now or previously, they would identify like 8 or 10 use cases they've been thinking about and then what has to change. And then we would, in like an hour or two, we have like most of what they need, they were thinking about doing on the whiteboard. Then we would spend 6 months talking and meeting with people. And at the end of that 6 months, we would come back and effectively pitch what we wrote on the whiteboard in that first 2 hours. And so now I've been telling people, like, let's just do your AI strategy in 2 hours because you're all going to come back with the same approach. And I know we're going to provide a link to this resource. So if anybody wants, they could download it. But we put together a PowerPoint template for an enterprise so you can import into your own deck and do your own strategy. It's totally free. If you want to hire us to do pay us $1 million or McKinsey to go do a strategy for you, you can do that, but it's not necessary to do that anymore. Ultimately, what everybody comes down to is a plan that realizes this is too big to do in a 6 month project. It's taking too long. And no matter how long we talk, we just keep coming back with more questions than answers. So we got to just get started before you learn anything because the impacts are so big. Ultimately, what everybody comes down with is some sort of like 5 pillars of dimensions of how their organization has to change. They've got to change their infrastructure, their people, their applications. There's like 4 or 5 buckets. And it turns into a think big but start small, like a visionary. We know we're going to have to change our organization all these different ways, and we're going to start with a first small project to start learning and filling in the gaps. And I think that's the only way to do it when you sit down with the CFO, because you can't go in with a plan that says, hey, we need a massive amount of money to change everything for some unimaginable future. The only way to do it is lay out a vision for how you're going to transform the organization and get started. And right now, the difference between the companies that are making progress and those that are not is the companies that are not making progress are just sitting around talking. And they've got their strategic steering committee that's going through all the different things they could do and all the risks. The ones that are making progress are the ones that picked a specific project and says, you know what, we're going to start here. We're going to start learning and see if we can get some value from this technology.
Dan, you're not off the hook. We need we need. I know you talk to CIOs every single day.
When I coach CIOs, where the conversation starts is with helping them be aware that what's expected of them from their organizations is different now than ever before. This is the first time where the employees, not just in IT, but all the employees in an organization come into the office and genuinely have to think about what it means to be a human and what it means for their colleague to be a bot. And what does it feel like when that degree that you went to school for, who knows, 4, 8, 12 years for, that kind of defines who you are and what you do with your life, all of a sudden, so much of that kind of classical textbook learning is obsolete. And you're left kind of thinking about, what's my role here? And what do the next few years look like? So all of a sudden, the CIO becomes a therapist and a psychologist and someone who's really helping the organization understand at a visionary level what it means to incorporate technology into every facet of your role, and to embrace the notion that the A in AI is really augmentation of human intelligence. And so a lot of the time, Kevin talked about good principles around how to define an AI strategy, but I'd add one pillar, and that's really helping every employee appreciate what it means to embrace AI and think more broadly about what it means when you can do the same amount of work, maybe an 8-hour day's worth of work, in 6 hours or 5 hours, and preparing for the kinds of upskilling and maybe reskilling that will keep you relevant in a decade, and thinking about how to use this really important moment to think about a future for yourself that involves perhaps pursuing a hobby, being a better parent, a spouse, but embracing the things that make us the best humans, and really realizing that to bring your best self to work, to be your most authentic self and feel motivated and inspired and like you can really do great things at work and outside work, is really part of the same conversation about thinking through the capabilities of the technology and using it to think about what your future is at work in a way that's far beyond certainly the kinds of technology, or the kinds of conversations that technologists have been expected to have with employees in the past.
Dan, I've got a great line that I use in those kind of conversations, and it is AI gives you the opportunity to stop focusing on the mechanics of your job and focus on the substance. And when you take somebody's particular role and you, we've done this at some clients where they've gone out and looked at, like, what does this analytics team do? And you find that like 60 to 70% of their time is spent gathering data, reading things, curating, cutting and pasting, and just like rote stuff that they don't really want to be doing in it. Go searching for things. They want to be thinking, analyzing, coming up with ideas, experimenting, trying stuff. And so that was true, when I did with the CIA, the FBI, intelligence community, regulators, compliance teams at banks. All that 60% of the work, they don't want to be doing that stuff. They want to focus on the interesting 40%. And the way you can lay out the future is, says this is what work is going to look like. It's no longer having to use their enterprise keyword search themes and cutting and pasting from PDFs into a Word document so you can do your analysis, or into your Excel spreadsheet. We're going to get the computers to do all that stuff. We want you thinking, collaborating, communicating. And I found that characterizing it that way really helps disarm people. The worst examples are when I see C-level executives, sometimes it's a CFO or CIO, sometimes it's others, will get in front of the company saying, hey guys, everything's going to change, but no one's going to be left behind, because nobody believes it, right? It comes across as very disingenuous. Instead of telling people the honest truth that, like, the nature of work is going to change, some job functions are going to go away. Your job is to find, like, how do you stay relevant with these new opportunities? Anyway, I don't know. I'm curious to see what you think of that, Dan. If you find that kind of those kind of conversations help.
Yeah, well, I mean, the kinds of things that you described are super dehumanizing. Like, nobody goes into work and they're like, you know what I really want to do today? I want to submit a trouble ticket.
Yeah.
You know what? I got out of bed all super fired up because today I get to update my benefits. It's open enrollment period. rah, go
Oh
team.
my
No, in
God.
fact,
Oh yeah, it's the worst thing it was to do. Yeah.
like that's what makes work a four-letter word. So if you
Yeah.
can extract all the things that make work suck out of work, then what's left is things that you love. And like one example that I'll share, People Rain customers, one of the largest streamers of movies. They support 300,000 employees and contractors around the globe. And they actually went as far as quantifying or calculating a friction score. And the idea was,
Wow.
what if we could identify all the parts of the business that generate friction and just systematically go and remove all those?
Yes.
What would that mean for the
Open
job of
enrollment
the
would be at the top of my list. I can tell you that.
right?
Right. Right.
Um, and Ben, who's very humble and I know has been doing a great job moderating, is actually one of the foremost experts on this idea of quantifying the value of employee experiences. Ben, regale us with your perspective. What does it take to kind of identify the friction and extract it when you're having these conversations with employees?
Like, even with modern topics, it's, I mean, management 101. Like, I like, we all know you can't improve what you can't measure. And when I did, over a decade, just focusing on, transforming the employee experience of interacting with IT, every first meeting with leadership is the same, or any level, operational level, management level, or leadership. Hey, man, what do you guys want? We want a world-class customer experience. We want it to be like the Genius Bar, depending on where they're from, but that was almost always the thing back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. So you want a world-class customer experience. What does that mean? Crickets. Well, how do you measure it? Crickets. And so, I mean, I would always tell them, like, I would say like 3-4x the employee experience of interacting with the tools and services you put out if you just have one North Star metric that meaningfully reflects the employee experience. And so, like that streaming service that you mentioned, Dan, I mean, come up with a friction score. What matters to your friction matters. I know that company. Friction matters to them. So they wanted a frictionless experience. So they measured it. And it's amazing if you put a little dashboard up there, us nerds will look at the dashboard and say, we want that to be green. Let's do that. And it really is as simple as that. I mean, there's a lot of cultural fast follows, but just answer honestly, everyone on this call, do you have a North Star metric for what you're trying to achieve? And if so, maybe pause, take a walk and reflect on that, come up with that. And then the other thing is just simplification. Like, everything's too complex. Just simplify. And yeah, it's a wild new world, but let me throw the ball back to you as we, again, like, I want to get as practical as possible. What should I be thinking as a CIO, or even in the management layer, as far as culture changes? We talked about this already a little bit, but when you think about, like, how I want a great culture, like the CIOs that told me I want a world-class experience, I said, here's how you do it. I used to sell a tool that measured employee experience. So we had that in a box for them. But if you want to change your culture, if and we all know CIOs of like Fortune 100 companies, the big ones, everyone knows the logo, and you get inside, and sometimes it feels like 1980 inside. Like, how is there any
Yeah.
practical tips you can give me if I'm a CIO of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company, and I want to change the culture? And there's not a playbook or a conference for that for me.
I think one of the things I realize is the lack of not empowering people to fail. Like, and it's like in Silicon Valley, we talk about like fail fast as part of the startup ecosystem, but there's such a fear of that in organizations where people are afraid to try anything, take any risk, take a step forward. We're not gonna, we're not going to test, open AI because our data has to go outside of, our environment. Like, whatever it is, there's such a fear of doing the wrong thing. And the best way to keep that fear going is, you know, lock down chat GPT. Don't let anybody use it. Don't let people talk about it. Talk about nothing but the risk from this sort of paranoid, something could go bad culture where you're just not getting people a chance to fail and change. So I'd say that is the biggest one, is like, are you do people really feel empowered to try new things? Obviously, without taking wild risks that's going to harm the organization, but most people are pretty smart enough to figure out what those boundaries are. Do you have the environment where you let people do that, and why do you believe that? Because a lot of people, I think they feel like they have a culture for experimentation, but if you look at how their employees behave in their middle management, they don't. I mean, they're afraid to go and say, it's budgeting time. We're going to red line through these 9 IT projects that we've been pouring money into for the past 15 years, and we're going to try generative AI, even though we don't know exactly where it's going to go yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the place where with generative AI, I mean, the great ideas can come from anywhere. Like we are about to have software not built by software developers. Like that's
Yeah.
exciting for me, you know? Another pro tip for what you were saying, at Yahoo, we had that same issue where folks were afraid to fail and they would just want, they would really have trouble iterating and doing the design thinking
Yep.
process. And so we taught them a trick that anyone can use. When you roll out something, you just put a big beta sign on it.
Yeah,
So we rolled
exactly.
out something, put the word beta and say, hey, everyone, we know this isn't ready for prime time, but we're trying to be innovative here. And so that is a pro tip. Go search for a little PNG file of the word beta, throw it on the stuff you roll out, and that kind of helps. But Dan, talk
And
to me.
actually, let me quick. I don't want
Yeah.
to forget this one because this is like the right now. What I see companies doing today with AI is they're actually putting powered by AI on the interface, and that sets customer expectations. It aligns them for what they can expect. It makes them more forgiving. Oh, it's going to have an error, and I've seen another companies do that. When I talked to the product managers, they thought that was our solution to doing that because it got rid of all of the fears about like wrong answer or people not understanding. People know what that means.
The human equivalent, Kevin, of what you're talking about is what I encourage every leader I meet to do first. And instead of slapping a beta logo or a powered by AI logo, I encourage them to have every employee take this simple pledge. And it goes like this. And anyone listening, I'm happy to share kind of the tenets of the pledge and how to implement it culturally. But it goes like this. Every employee signs a pledge that says, I agree that whenever my work product has been complemented or augmented by AI, I will openly share. I will, so to speak, slap that logo on it
Yeah.
and be proud of it. And that does three things culturally, Ben, to your question. One, it says we celebrate innovation. AI should not be something that is relegated to the shadows. We want our employees to openly acknowledge and take pride of the times when they are being augmented by artificial means. The second thing it does is it creates this vibrant dialogue around the whole company about what use cases maybe people weren't thinking of. What's marketing doing and what's sales doing and sales ops and manufacturing? It really just opens up the aperture and gets everyone thinking and talking about where we could go culturally. And then the third thing is it's an opportunity for leadership to say, we embrace change. We're going to be on the right side of innovation. And so ironically, it's something that's so non-technical. It's a couple words in an email that goes out to every new employee and every existing employee and says, just, we take pride in what you're doing, and we want you to educate us and your peers about what you're doing. And that simple pledge I've seen have such amazing transformative power over helping employees feel like they're valued and trusted and respected. And that's really how to create that kind of innovation flywheel that's hard to get if you don't lead out as leaders with that message that we embrace what's ahead, even though it might be confusing, even though we might be uncertain. At least we celebrate the concept of innovation.
So Dan, let me just ask you a question about that. So is that in scenarios where I don't use ChatGPT because that's like the most common interface now, but like employers are using ChatGPT to help them write their marketing message or to summarize things, but they're not sharing it because either they think they might get in trouble or they're afraid people will think they're not as smart because they had to use ChatGPT to write something. Like what do you like? What's the psychology behind that you think that people's behavior there?
Yeah, so leadership has inadvertently sent the message, I'm just speaking in broad terms here, but I think this is probably consistent with what you're finding, that we're apprehensive. We're concerned about
Yep.
IP infringement, and we're
Yep.
concerned that our IP might leak, or we might misuse copyrighted material, and
Yep.
we're afraid that the employees might treat ChatGPT like their therapist and start to do inappropriate things with it. Well, what this does is says, let's have that conversation.
Yep.
Let's be comfortable addressing head on what the risks are, but not letting that necessarily be a break on innovation.
Yep.
And so, I think employees are getting the message, I think inadvertently, that they shouldn't take pride in what they're doing, and that they shouldn't share that their work was augmented by AI.
Yep.
And we want to flip that conversation on its head and embrace the fact that while we're going to address the risks with guardrails, and we're going to do a lot of things that go into what I call responsible AI, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to pay a tax on innovation, as
Yep.
as we define a responsible AI policy.
Dan, I love this, and so I'm getting a ton out of this conversation here. I hope everybody else is, but I had never thought about doing that. But you're right, that solves a lot of problems because it's I think a lot of CIOs intuitively know, like, there's probably not that much organizational risk using ChatGPT. I mean, like, what are they really? They're going to take your IP and train your models. I mean, like, if you think about the real existential risk to your organization, an employee using ChatGPT is probably really low. What is an existential risk is falling behind and not innovating and becoming obsolete because you're not keeping up with people who are leveraging this technology, or having your key employees go somewhere else where they are appreciated. And that's a great way to send this. What you described is a great way to send that message that's not just words, but through your actions. So,
Gentlemen, like, we could talk for a long time about this. I wanted to, we've got a great question from the audience. And for me, I'm really excited to hear your answer to this question, because I typically think about thought workers. I typically think about, like, oh, how does this help marketing? Or I was in IT for years. How does this help IT? But from Aaron Reyes had a great question. Like, how do you see this evolution in AI and ops, like efficiency 2.0, map into existing the modern approaches, like the Andon Jidoka Japanese approaches of, like, if you see yourself in a hole, stop digging. If you see something, say something. Like, in the large enterprise operations environments, industrial environments, like, away from that, I mean, that to me, I would be scared a little bit more. I would probably be updating my LinkedIn a little bit quicker if I was in those areas. So tell me, like, how have you seen, or how do you envision AI really coming into those areas, into the industrial and large enterprise operations environments?
I mean, that's where we do a lot of our work, and I'll just, because I can't predict out more than, like, 3 days in advance because this is
Yeah,
changing so
right.
fast. That the most companies, when they think about where do I get started with this technology, they end up attaching themselves to the use case, which I call automated document processing. And so, if you take any business process at any company, you're going to find a work stream where people are ingesting and processing unstructured text documents. They could be contracts, customer support emails, resumes, applications, whatever claims, underwriting notes, attending physician statements, mortgage applications. This is workflow of paper, where it's paper, like, information coming in. You're going to analyze, transform, summarize it, categorize it, and then it goes somewhere for some type of decision. That, and I've read one study, it's just like 40% of all government work is in that workflow. That's where the most immediate automation is going to happen, because it is the lowest risk way to get started. You're effectively using these generative AI, large language models, kind of the way they work out of the box, and you feed it some information, you process it according to some pattern, and it goes somewhere else. So I think that's the low hanging fruit where I see it being implemented in the industrial scales. It's with unstructured text. There's a lot of more exciting thing in image processing and agents and decision making that's really going to transform work. But where do you get the quickest win? It is processing unstructured text as your first project.
I love that. And then in the interest of time, I always like to ask this question, like, is there something during this conversation that you haven't said yet that you would want to say? Like both of you, I mean, you're both paid a lot of money to help like Fortune 100 CIOs like figure out the AI strategy. Can you give away a freebie here if there's one thing, if someone just joined the call and there's one thing you could share with them, whether it's like leadership, operational level, or C-suite, there's one thing you can give them to go as they go into the next normal meeting. What is it? And we'll start with Dan and then go to Kevin.
Anything that can be predicted is better left to machines, but anything that requires empathy or judgment or rational thinking is and always will be better left to humans. 250 conversations in on the podcast, and one of the things that I've realized is I'm firmly on Team Human. I believe that by embracing the power of these technologies, we become the best versions of humans. And I believe in a future where all of that, like we all talked about, friction at work goes away. And I truly believe that what's left is the things that we love doing, that are celebrations of what only humans can achieve. That to me is what we should be excited about.
My advice is stop talking and start doing. Like stop talking about ethics, like AI ethics, there's ethics and risk and policies, and just start doing and find a way to get started by working around your constraints. You probably have an organization that isn't ready to send all of its data to a large language model for very good reasons. Okay, generate data. I can fire at ChatGPT and I can generate tables and databases, and I can generate policy documents, and I can generate any data you want and start testing the feasibility of some of these ideas. That is the biggest issue as I see, is people are still trying to find the perfect starting point and solve all the organizational risks, and they're taking the biggest risk, which is doing nothing.
I love that. As I mentioned at the beginning, I just started after being friends with Dan for years, just joined People Rain. And a phrase that you hear over and over and over again is bias to action, bias to action, bias to action. Turns out, I mean, thousands of year old concept, right? The step of 1,000 miles, begins with a single step, right? But it's totally true. So thank you for that. And thank you for that reminder. I was an IT leader for years. Analysis paralysis is a real thing. So I think that's really good advice. You're not going to get to the future by thinking about ways that
it's changing too fast. None of it, like I can't keep up. You forget keeping up. You're not going to be able to keep up. Your organization can't keep up. But and you're not going to solve all your ethical dilemmas and challenges in your next working session. You're going to learn by doing.
Well, everyone, we've got great questions in the chat. I could chat with you all day, but I know most people probably have jobs to get back to, and especially have a lot of new ideas to think about. So, Dan, if you would, can I pass it to you, and can we just, get actionable about this and give them something to say, like, okay, if I'm ready to take action, as we just chatted about, like, what's step one?
Scan that QR code on the screen. Kevin talked about the Prolego methodology, and we'll make sure that we share out access to that. Similarly, PeopleRain provides a risk-free 5-day AI data analysis that will give you a sense of kind of where your organization is on that spectrum of not ready to ready, and we do it in a data-driven way. So at the end of that 5-day exercise, you'll get a good sense of across 12 different AI tasks, how your data performed. And that will give you kind of a report card to get a sense of, to Ben's point and Kevin's point, have a bias for action, pick something to do. And this AI data analysis really gives you kind of the tools and the framework to be able to go ahead and do that. And also it gives you kind of the right set of questions to ask to make AI truly a center of excellence for your organization. And I think I can speak for Kevin when I say that that's really our objective, is empowering you to be able to take some of these new technologies and processes and get immediate value out of them that hopefully benefits every employee in your organization, but hopefully you personally as well. I'll share on the screen here, both Kevin and Ben were great guests on AI in the future of work, but another way to continue this dialogue is become part of the community. That QR code will link you to 250 different versions of conversations like this with some of the world's greatest thinkers, visionaries, academics, entrepreneurs, having really thoughtful discussions about what's ahead. I'll, like Ben has done, extend my thanks, of course, to Kevin for being a panelist, but to all of you for listening. And I know, speaking for me personally, I really look forward to continuing the dialogue with all of you.
Yeah, thank you guys for putting this together and hosting. It was you really made it easy, and it was a fun conversation.